uninteresting? All about science and all those things? Okay, well that's what you're going to hear. So, 25 years ago I wrote The Design of Everyday Things. Kind of like it in Portuguese, is the design for day to day. But that was 1988, and we're almost at 2013, which is 25 years. So the book, the principles are still correct, but the examples are horrible, right? So what's a slide projector? So it's time to change the book. Now, the last book lasted 25 years, so I want this version to last 25 years. So that's 50 years of the design of everyday things. Now that's a problem. When I wrote The Design of Everyday Things, I did not talk about computers. I was really lucky. Because if I would have talked about computers, it would be out of date today. So what can I talk about that will last for 25 years? And that's what this talk is about. How I am rewriting the design of everyday things. And it's almost finished. In fact, I have to mail it to the publisher next Monday. But the reason that the principles are still true is because even though technology changes, people stay the same. So that's a really important beginning. So let's take a look at the timeline from 1988 to now to 2038. So what did the computer look like in 1988? That was the personal computer. But what does it look like today? That's what it looks like today. And what's it going to look like in 2038? Who knows? And what does a mobile cell phone look like in 1988? That big, monstrous thing. And what does it look like today? That. And what will it be in 2038? Or a door. That's what a door looked like in 1988. This is what a door looks like today. And what's it going to look like in 2038? So, I'm a professor, so you're going to be asked questions. So here's your first quiz. Things have changed in the last 25 years. This profession did not exist 25 years ago. You've been working hard to make products better. You've seen what happens in the stores. You've seen what's happened with kitchen appliances. You've seen what happened with the personal computer and the telephone, with the automobile. So, quiz. How many of you think things are getting better? Anybody? Yeah. Pretty good. How many of you think things are getting worse? A few of you. How many think it's just as bad as it ever was? So let's take a look. I stayed in a hotel in London about 2 weeks ago, and this was the sink in the hotel. And I washed my hands, and you can't quite see it, but there's dirty water in that sink. How do you get rid of it? I searched all over. I looked carefully at the plug. I even tried to pry it open. I finally had to leave my hotel room and go to the front desk of the hotel and ask, how do I get the water out of my sink? And they said, oh, it's simple. You push down. Who would have thought of it? Ford in the United States just released its new automobile, the 2013 Ford Taurus, with the electronics provided by Sony. And I don't know if you can see it, but right there, see, that's so you can make a phone call, and that's a contact list, and there's a picture of the person you want to call. So how good is this? It's really a touch-sensitive screen, very advanced, the most modern software. Consumer Reports is the magazine in the United States that's most reliable, most trustworthy. When they review something, they test it for a long time. They have many drivers. So their word really is accurate. And here's what Consumer Reports said. why my Ford Touch stinks. It stinks. My Ford Touch frustrates like few other control systems. Okay, quiz. Are things getting better? How many do you think things are getting better? Not as many hands. How many think it's getting worse? You're not undecided. And are things just as bad as they always were? More hands this time. Yeah. Because as we get all these new technologies and new methods and new things, we have more things that we can screw up. So, to the design of everyday things. The design of everyday things is really about human-centered design, and human-centered design has two parts. One is experience design, and the other is the human-centered design process. And the human-centered design process, I'm not going to talk about today. That's because that's worthy of an entire lecture by itself. But to remind you, that's this iterative process where we go out, we observe people, we understand their needs, how they work. We then get ideas, generate ideas, test them. We build rapid prototypes, so we go out and we test, and then we cycle again. We go back and observe and get ideas, refine the ideas, prototype, test, going around and around, each time getting better and better, until time runs out. So I'm going to talk mostly about UX, experience design. And experience design has two components. First, there are 6 principles of interaction, which I will cover. And then there are 7 stages of action that underlie the principles. And we'll go through those. So the 6 principles are these. And I'll go through each one at a time. Affordances, signifiers, mapping, constraints, feedback, conceptual, mental models. And we'll start with affordances. So the affordance is this relationship between the world and you, and it's really best for physical products. So the affordance of this pot is in the handle, where obviously my hand can go in there, and I can therefore lift it. I can also lift the whole pot. So affordance talks about the possibilities. Now, designers have loved affordances, and so affordances have been picked up by the design community, and usually it's used wrong. Because it's especially difficult to talk about affordances with digital objects. There's nothing to pick up or touch, where you can touch the whole screen. And so it's very difficult to talk about it. And I've had this problem for a long time, and so we'll come back to it. But that's why I think affordances are not very important. So although that was sort of the main theme of the first edition of the book, it's now a secondary theme. Here's the affordance, or it looks like an affordance, but obviously it failed. So instead of affordances, I want to talk about signifiers. Because what a signifier is a signal. It tells you what is possible. And a signal can be something that's visible, like the handle on the coffee pot, or it can be a sign. So in the human processing structure, in what I will call the 7 stages of action, the left-hand side talks about doing something to the world. And the right-hand side asks about, well, what happened? Well, signifiers are what help us understand what we can do. So, for example, here's a door, 2 doors. And there's a flat plate on each door. And a flat plate has the nice affordance of pushing. So you would say the physical affordance here is signaling. The signifier is push, which is obviously wrong because they had to put up signs saying, pull. You pull this one, you push this one. There's no way you would know except by having the sign, and that's the signifier. And so when you add a graphic element, when we do graphic design, or when you add a word or an explanation, those are signifiers. And that's what designers are really going to do. Designers are going to shape the physical affordances and shape the thing they are constructing, the things you are constructing, to signal what the person is doing. So I really believe signifiers are the key to good design. You get mixed signifiers sometimes. Here's a vertical bar on the door that's a clear signal to grab and pull. And the sign very clearly says push. It says it in Korean, it says it in English. And it's really strange, because these are good doors. It doesn't matter. You can pull them and you can push them. So why did the designer or somebody think they had to say that it should be pushed? No idea. Here's something that didn't need a signifier, because the handle itself said, well, it's a vertical bar, you can grab it. You can either push it or pull it, and either way works. That's good design. Misleading signifier. Here's the signifier I've already told about. There's no signifier about how to get the water out. The only thing is that little crack, which didn't work. Here's an app, a typical type of app. This happens to be on Android, but you have the same thing on the iPhone. The Android and the iPhone are not well designed. I know you love them, but they're not well designed to help you decide what you can do. Do you push once with your finger or twice with a finger? Or maybe it's 3 times. Or maybe you use 1 finger or 2 fingers or 3 fingers. Or maybe you swipe left, or maybe you swipe right. Or maybe you swipe up, or maybe you swipe down. I've watched many of you do that. You go, no, nothing's that way, or that way, or this way. Now, it's kind of fun, and you don't mind. You don't even notice you're having trouble, but you are. So, for example, this one, I can slide it to the right. How was I supposed to know that? I discovered it completely by accident. In fact, in preparing for this talk, I discovered it. I said, oh, here's a good screen where I don't know what you can do. It. See, you can swipe up, you can swipe down, and nothing happens. Swipe left, nothing happens. Swipe right. Oh. No signals, no way of knowing. So, Microsoft has really good interaction designers. And Microsoft has come out with Windows Phone 8, which I think is brilliant. I actually think it's superior to the iPhone and the Android, which are really the same. So on this one, how do I know which direction I can move? Well, look down at the bottom. There's part of the picture showing, which is a clear signifier that, hey, there's more of the picture, and if I only lift the screen up, I can see it. That's good design. It's a natural signifier. Doesn't shout, I'm a sign that says push up. It just naturally says, hey, there's more information below here. So those are signifiers, and I now think signifier is the critical thing that most of you should be attending to. Mapping. Well, here's a good example of bad mapping. So mapping is a relationship between the controls and what happens. So here's a stove with 6 burners in a rectangle, and 6 controls in a vertical line, and which one works which? And every stove is designed differently. Whereas you could map it very well. You could map it like this. This is a 5-burner stove, but the 5 controls are in the same spatial arrangement as the burners. And one of my favorite examples has always been the Mercedes-Benz seat control in a car, where there's a picture of the seat. You just move the part of the seat on the picture that you want the car to move, and it will. If I push there, the seat back moves forward. Now, today, almost every car uses a control like this, and that's good mapping. How many of you have this translating receiver? It's weird. Up on top, it has a little thing that says lock, and then it has something that calls volume. And I really trouble finding the volume unless I'm looking at it, and it's dark in that auditorium. You can't see it. And so I wondered if I set the volume right and I said lock, it would keep the volume fixed. No. Whatever lock does, it doesn't lock the volume. And on the side, in really small letters, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tiny little buttons labeled in white on a light gray background that you're supposed to read in the dark. I'm glad they gave this to us. It's a really good example of bad mapping, bad signifiers, bad design. Kind of nice to always find bad examples. It's easy. Okay, so there's this processing structure again. The left is executing, and signifiers and mapping are signs that help you know what you should do. Here's the Apple EarPod or earphone. This is the new one, but it's the same as the old one except for the shape. So, many of you probably have it, right? How many of you have it? Have this earphone? Yes. How many of you think it has one button? How many of you think it has two buttons? I see a couple hands. How many of you think it has three buttons? A few hands. How many of you think it has four buttons? Well, let's look at it close up. It has a button on top that's labeled plus. It has a button on the bottom that's labeled minus. That's actually good mapping, because the plus one makes sound louder and the minus makes sound softer, and it's usually held vertically, and up means more. It's a universal direction. In general, up always means more. You would never say that if you wanted somebody to speak softer, because it's like piling stuff on putting sand on top of sand, and it gets higher and higher. It means more. And the bottom should be negative, less. So that's good. Now, there's a space in between them. What's in that space between them? Most people think, a lot of people think, it's just a space. Well, it's the center button. So, how do you use a center button? Anybody know? You can play, you can pause, you can go back, you can go forward. Wow, all just with one button. That's pretty good. So let's take a look at it. So if you're listening to music or watching a video and you hit the one click, it starts or stops it. Now, what if you don't like that song or you don't like that video, you want to hear the next one? Well, you do 2 clicks. And what if you, I want to go back and hear the previous one? Well, you do 3 clicks. There it is, 3 clicks. And what if you want to go fast forward? Well, you do 2 clicks and then you hold it down. And if you want to go back, well, 3 clicks. You want to go back, fast, reverse, well, 3 clicks and hold it down. You remember all that? But I'm not finished. Suppose you have a phone call, and the phone rings. You hit 1 click and it answers the phone, or when you finish, you click and it ends the phone. Now, suppose you had a phone call already you're talking to, and now another phone call comes in, so you have 2 phone calls. How do you go back and forth between them? Well, you click. A click switches to the other phone call. What if you want to click to the other phone call and hang up on the one you're in? Oh, well, that's simple. You hold it for more than 2 seconds. Now, what if a phone call comes in and you don't want to answer it at all? Well, you hold it for more than 2 seconds, and that declines the new call. Got it? And we're not finished yet. Suppose you want to say, I can't remember all that. I just want to give instructions by voice. So how do you tell it to go to voice command? Well, you press and you hold it, and then it eventually goes beep, beep. And now you know you can give voice commands. Apple. They're known to understand something about design. But what do you think? How many of you think this is good design? A half a head. And a shrug of the head. How many of you think it's bad design? A couple of, well, yeah. How many of you think it's a good start, but they got carried away? Yeah. And how many say, well, what else could they have done? So it's an interesting problem. So let me ask you, go back. You think things are getting better? How many? How many think things are getting worse? And how many think things are just as bad as they always were? Yeah, we're getting more and more in that category. So let's go back to the Apple controls. Can you do better is the real question. I have a design philosophy. Call it Design Rule 1. Don't criticize unless you can do better. So think about it. They wanted you to be able to use this while running or while while you were busy doing other things, because you didn't need to use the button. If you look at the Apple, the iPod, or the iPhone, it has a screen. So in fact, all the operations you want to do are nicely laid out on the screen and they're easy to find and easy to do from the screen. So this is a secondary thing, so it's not critical. Second, the mapping isn't bad. One click starts and stops, or answers the phone, or hangs up the phone. 2 rapid clicks goes to the next song. 3 rapid clicks goes to the previous song. Now that's not so hard to learn. And then even the 2 rapid clicks and hold is fast forward. That's a bit harder, but it makes a bit of sense. And they use the same philosophy, 3 rapid clicks and hold to go to the other one. Now, I think personally the correct answer is they made a really good start, but they got carried away. So as they did all the others, it gets to be a bit much to remember. But it doesn't do any harm, because if you can't remember, well, you don't do it, that's all. Because you have the screen. You can always use the screen. So actually, I don't think it's great design, but I'm not going to criticize, because if I were asked to design with just that one button, I would simply say, don't do all those functions. But if you wanted to do the functions, that's probably about as good as you can do. So let's continue on our 6 principles of interaction, and now we're up to constraints. Constraints simplify life because they prevent you from doing things you shouldn't be doing, and they make it possible, make it so there's only one thing to do. So a good way of having constraints is basically in the talk we heard on micro-interaction. If you only make one thing possible, well, gee, the only choice you have is yes, I want it, or no, I don't. That's a strong constraint, which means you're not going to make an error. Or you're unlikely. In the physical world, this is one of my favorite examples in the United States. There's a fire in the building, you're running down the stairs, you get to the ground floor, but you're panicked, right? You're running away from the fire, so you keep going into the basement and the sub-basement where you're trapped. So the law says you're not allowed to do that. When you get to the ground floor, sometimes there's no stair going down. You have to go outside, and there's another stairway. Or there's a door like this that blocks the stairs, so you can't go down without realizing that something is special here. That's a constraint. Here's a lack of a constraint. This is the Amazon Kindle. And the way you change the page is you tap the right side, which gives you the next page, or tap the left side, which gives you the previous page. But look how you're holding it. You're holding it on the physical edge. And if your finger is a little bit off, it starts turning pages. And I've been reading sometimes on my Kindle, and suddenly the pages start turning. Boom, 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 boom. And there is a back button, but only, I may have gone 20 pages forward before I was able to stop. And the back button takes me back 1 page. What a pain. That's a lack of a constraint. There should be a physical. What actions are possible? Okay, those are 6 principles of interaction. Now let's go back to experience design, which requires great interaction, but also pleasure and emotion. So when I wrote The Design of Everyday Things, the word pleasure, the word emotion, beauty, none of those exist in the book. And that's a mistake. And I'm correcting that now, because you can't avoid emotion. Emotion is part of the human system. And we actually have 2 systems, cognition and emotion, and they work together. So as we've looked at the 6 principles of interaction, now let's look at the 7 stages of action, and you'll see where emotion plays a role. Again, back to the human processing structures. The left, I said, is execution. There are actually 3 parts of the execution. The first is, I have to figure out, oh, it's too bright in here. What do? I can ask somebody to turn down the lights, or I can go and find the switch myself, or I can live with it, or I can whatever. And then actually when I've decided how I'm going to do it, I have to make a plan for doing it. And then I physically have to do the operation. There are 3 separate stages. And the same with evaluation. First there has to be some signal. So I push this button and I see the green light. Well, then I have to interpret the green light and decide if that's what I had in mind. So there are 3 stages there. And you can basically say that the goal is stating the purpose. And this intention to act is saying, well, what's possible? And then the plan is, well, what am I going to do? And the execution is doing it. And then on the evaluation side, first I have to perceive what's there. And then I have to figure out, what does it mean? And is this it? Now, emotion. Emotions are with us all the time, because emotions tell us whether the world is good or bad. They help us expect what is happening. Expectations drive a tremendous amount of emotion. You're driving your car and you can see the traffic light up ahead and you want to get through it before it turns red. Your stomach tightens up. You ever have that feeling? You kind of feel yourself tighten up just because you're not sure if you're going to make the traffic light. That's an expectation-driven emotion. You come across a very... Look, I can walk with no problem right up to the edge right here, right? Even my feet are slightly over it. If this were 100 meters in the air, I couldn't. Now why? It isn't any harder to do it 100 meters in the air than here. But it's the emotional system that's sort of paralyzing us. Emotions are tightly coupled to our action. So emotions often happen first. Because it's really important to know whether something is safe or dangerous, and it tenses the muscles or relaxes the muscles. So you can tell whether somebody is tense or relaxed often before they know it. You can see their muscles are all tense and they're not even aware of it. So a lot of the emotional system is automatic. So experience design requires not only great interaction, but pleasure and emotion. And it has 3 levels of emotions. Of those of you who know my book, Emotional Design, know this, so I'll do it fast. The bottom level I call visceral, is automatic. You're born with it. Basically, everybody in the world is the same. You're afraid of heights, you're afraid of the dark, you dislike very bright, you dislike very loud sounds, you don't like it if it's utterly, completely quiet. You like sweet taste, you dislike bitter tastes. Now, we all know that afraid of the heights, well, there are people who work at high heights, so they've overcome that, but it took time. And bitter taste, well, a lot of your favorite foods are bitter. But the first time you tasted it, you didn't like it. We come to like that, but we had to... The only kind of learning that takes place at the visceral level is adaptation, or classical conditioning. Very simple learning. The in-between state is behavioral, and that's where our skills are. So I'm walking up and down the stage without paying any attention. It's subconscious. It's such a well-learned skill, I can do it without conscious attention. When I talk to you, I do it without conscious attention. If I tried to talk to you in Portuguese, it would occupy my whole brain, and I would do a bad job at it. And I would pronounce the words wrong, and I would stumble. And I would forget my talk. So the behavioral level is automatic. But we often take years and years to learn those skills so they become automatic. The top level is reflective, and that's the only level of consciousness. That's what looks over what we're doing. And when we are first learning, we're using reflective processing to guide the learning. Reflection looks back at the past and maybe projects about the future. And you have 3 different kinds of emotions at these 3 different levels. They're all important for behavior, and they're critically important for emotion. At the bottom level, it's basically, it's visceral, we call it affect. There's positive affect or negative affect, or valence sometimes. And it's simply, you're tense or you're relaxed. And at the middle level, it's expectation-based. Ooh, I have a fear that I'm not going to make the light, or a fear that it'll fall, or I really hope, or I'm pleased, but it's a general level. At the top level, We assign blame and credit. Hey, I gave a great talk. It was because of me. I gave a crappy talk. Ugh, it's my fault. I feel shame. You gave a great talk. I feel great pride in your talk. Or maybe jealousy. Or you gave a bad talk. I assign blame or credit at this level. And this is a level that really drives your dreams. And it's why you might wake up in the middle of the night sweating because you've imagined some horrible thing and the whole emotional system has gone to work and it's all in your imagination. Now go back to this level. At the lowest level, I actually, when I do something, I touch and I move and the feel gives me a tremendous amount of information. Does it feel wobbly? Does it feel secure? Does it feel good? Does it feel bad? And so the perception and the doing are the visceral level of emotions. And they make you feel good or bad. And that's one of the reasons that styling and beauty and attractiveness and a good feel and good fit are so very important to the product. Many of us fall in love with the product simply from their looks and appearance. That's especially true of Apple products. That's very true in the automobile industry. That's why stylists are so important, that you say, I don't like the looks of that car, I'm not going to buy it. Or I really love that car, I wish I could afford it. Not based on anything else except the appearance. The middle level, what is possible to do, what is it, and then also, what does this feedback mean? That's the behavioral level. And that's where you have these expectation-based emotions, where your fear is either confirmed or disconfirmed, or your hopes are either confirmed or disconfirmed. And so you get emotions here that are based upon their behavior. And then at the highest level, we have the reflective emotions. Again, where guilt, where credit or blame is being assigned, and where you think hard and project the future, or think hard and project the past, and imagine, what if I had done this, or what if this would have happened? So you can't separate the two. The two systems work together as a unified whole. So you really cannot separate emotion from cognition, which means you've got to think hard about it in design. All right, well, those are the principles. So now how am I going to write the design of everyday things in 2038? Is this what the future is going to bring? This is Sebastian Thrun. He's a senior vice president at Google, in charge of Project X, their experimental project. He's the guy who designed Google's automatic driving cars, and this is the Google Glass. Little, very, very stylishly designed eyeglasses with a little display in the upper right-hand corner, so you can see an image about 2 meters in front of you, and you can read and see all sorts of information, like when Sebastian sees me, he says, "Hi, Don." And I don't know whether he really knows who I am, whether his glasses have said, "That's Don." Or maybe this is what it's going to be like in 2038. It's already a field. It's called brain-computer or brain-machine interaction. And there are many people around the world working on it. And I've been on study commissions for the US government to look at the possibility of brain-machine interaction. It's already very valuable for people with, who are paralyzed. It's very slow, it's inefficient, but they can't do anything. So the fact they can now communicate with other people by their thoughts, by their brain control, is very, very valuable. Can we make it do better? Well, so far, the best brain-machine communication is done with the fingers. My fingers translate my brain stuff really rapidly and efficiently. And by the way, it's the behavioral level. Look, wiggle your second finger. Try it. Now wiggle your third finger. Now tell me what you did different. You have no idea what you did. All you know is you thought, wiggle the second finger, and it wiggled. And you thought, wiggle the third finger, and it wiggled. And the muscles, the correct muscles got involved and did the thing, but did you send the signal to the muscle? No. You have no idea how you did it. It's really an efficient system. We can't make that. We can't manage that yet, not with these exterior electrodes. It's too noisy, too big, and we don't even understand the signals. And the emotional system mostly signals chemically, not electrically. Well, let's go back. There's the computer and the phone of today. Is it going to look like that in 28? Or maybe the same thing? Or maybe it's going to look like that in 2038, or that. Or here's my watch. That's actually the same watch I'm wearing. It's a really nice German watch. It automatically receives the radio signals from stations all around the world, so it keeps the correct time setting. It does all sorts of neat things. Why do I need a watch? Maybe that's the watch of the future. Maybe that's the watch, the phone, the computer. Do I really need 3 separate devices to do these things? After all, your cell phone is a computer. It just doesn't have a big screen. And maybe this will be the same answer. I just send the signals directly to the brain. I wonder what time it is, and oh, there's the answer. We are changing rapidly. So for example, we now do 3D printing, which is going to change our business a lot, because pretty soon people can design their own things and print it and get the answer right there. Or maybe there'll be a little shop down the street. The printers are too expensive today. Only big companies can afford them, and schools, but the price is coming down very, very rapidly. So maybe it'll be like the early days of copying machine. When I need a new lampshade, I go to the internet and I find the plans I like, and then maybe I hire a designer to modify it slightly, and then I say print, and then I go walk a block to the print store and pick it up. So some people will design themselves and some will not, and so you can imagine the do-it-yourself industry, the hackers, the makers, really going to town on this. So they've already started. When? I can't understand it. No. Hello? But even so, they had the concept of a video conference. 1879. It takes a long time. The amount of infrastructure that's required, the way you have to change people's perceptions. We now have cars that can drive by themselves. How long before they are on the road? Not as experimental vehicles, but that you can buy them. Long time. Almost every manufacturer today, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, VW, Toyota, have cars that can drive themselves. The commercial ones you buy have adaptive cruise control, so there's a radar, and as they drive down the road, if a car comes in front of you, it slows up to keep a good, safe distance. If you start leaving your lane, your car warns you, and the car could actually steer back into the lane. It can park by itself, parallel parking. They're afraid to release them on the roads. So what's the future? Let me go through this. Now, to the translator, don't translate the rest because it's too fast. You won't make it. And the same with our sign language interpreter. You may have trouble. But there'll be words, so they can read the words. So, look at the devices. What will the devices be? Large, small, wearable, implanted? There'll be a wide range of devices. You can translate now. A wide range of devices. I just got called by a reporter saying, Apple brought out this new 7-inch tablet, small or mid-sized tablet, and Steve Jobs said, we never will bring out a small tablet because people's fingers are too big. So what do I think? And I told him, I think it was one of the stupidest things Steve Jobs ever said. Because Apple has always had 2 sizes of tablets. One was the iPad, the other they called the iPhone, or the Touch. What's the difference between a Touch and an iPad? Nothing, except the size. So we have big ones and medium-sized ones and small ones. And we're going to have even smaller ones, and we have in-between sizes. You saw the Samsung Galaxies, which are sort of in-between. And we're going to have wall-size screens, and we're going to have tiny screens, and we're going to have no screens. We're going to have foldable screens and roll-up screens. And you imagine it, and it will be there. And devices, they don't have any screens because you can't afford it, or people, you don't have the space, or people are too busy with their eyes, so you can't really let them watch the screen. Okay, how are we going to control it? Oh, gestures, speech, location, direct brain-machine control. Maybe it's completely autonomous, no control required. I believe that when I ask all these which of the devices we're going to have, it's going to be all of that. When I say how will we control it, it's going to be all of that. And what about displays? There'll be huge displays and tiny displays and displays all over, piles of displays and no displays, as I've already said. And what about design? Well, no visible controls, no perceived affordances, no signifiers. It's going to be a mess. It's going to be wonderful. And the machines are going to be reading our intentions and reading our minds and doing things for us. And when they get it right, it'll be neat. And when they get it wrong, you'll hate them. Look, I don't even know my own intentions. How is a machine supposed to guess it? What about the corporate policies? No standards, competing standards, walled incompatible gardens? What about privacy? Corporations own your data. Everything is going to require a subscription. You happy with all of that? Facebook wants to own everything you do, but Amazon wants to own everything you buy or look at, and Apple wants to own everything you do through Apple, and Google wants to own everything you do. Where is the role for the small person? Or where is the role for the person who isn't trying to own you? So here's another quiz for you. Who are Google's customers? You know, the website, you search. Gotta yell, I can't hear you. So who are Google's customers? Those of us who use, the Google website, Google search, Google Translate. All of us. Wrong. Razorfish is Google's customers. Advertising agencies are Google's customers. What's Google's products? You think it's the search, or you think it's Google Docs, or you think it's the Android? We are their products. They own our data, they sell our data to the advertisers. And ask that same question about Facebook, or ask the same question about Amazon, or ask it about Apple. Now, Amazon actually doesn't sell its data to anybody because it wants to keep it private to itself, so it can sell you all this other stuff. Google's customers are the advertising agencies. Google's product is what it knows about you. And what does that mean for the future? This is just the beginning. So what are your fears? Rogue terrorism, bad guys, onerous security requirements? Yeah, all of that's true. So, the future. Here we go again. Is it getting better? Not so many hands again. Getting worse? And about as bad as it always was? The future. It's going to be good for us. Boy, all these new devices, all these new ways of controlling it with no standards, everybody doing it completely differently, and trying, and some will succeed and some will fail, and everybody wants to be different. They're going to need designers. They're especially going to need interaction designers. So it's really good for us. The worse the products are, the better for us. A few years ago, BMW brought out the iDrive because the front of the dashboard of the car was so complex, it was just too much, too many things. They said, we're going to simplify it and just have a screen and a knob. It'll be as easy to use as your computer. You can control 700 things with this one knob. The car has 700 things to control. It was a complete disaster. And it was the best thing that ever happened to BMW, because it woke them up that they better hire some designers. It's actually a good thing that happened to me, because now BMW is one of my clients. And that will happen to you. That these problems will require, it will force people to realize they need people who understand technology and people. And these people are called interaction designers. Who will design the future? Well, actually, it's an interesting geographical question. Do you think it's all going to be done in North America? or maybe the EU, or maybe the BRIC countries, or maybe Eastern Asia. Well, let's see, what does BRIC mean? So let's try to understand BRIC. Let's see. The B, well, that stands for Brazil. And the C, that stands for China. So it's sort of between Brazil and China, right? And the R, you know, the R stands for relationships. A lot of this new technology is all about social interaction and social relationships and how we communicate with each other and how groups across the world communicate with each other and how you keep in touch with friends for a lifetime even though you separate and are in different places, and how you decide where you can have drinks tonight. You can decide at the moment. You don't have to plan it ahead of time. You can say, hey, a bunch of us are here. Come and join us. About relationships. So what does I stand for? What is the name of this conference? Interaction. So there is the future. It's going to come from North America, and it's going to come from the EU, and it's going to come from Eastern Asia, and it's going to come from Brazil, and it's going to come from China. All of the above. And it's going to be about all that I've talked about in relationships and interaction, because those don't change. Those are independent. Those are human characteristics that will always be necessary. The technologies for doing it will change. But those will be the constants. So, who will design the future? You will. Thank you.